Yeah, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We'll start off the session by reciting Al-Fatiha as well first, for some barakah as well as so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ease our understanding in whatever knowledge that we will gain over the next hour or so. So Al-Fatiha. Amen. And we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the opportunity to come together to seek knowledge together on a platform like Zoom. Though because we cannot meet physically is to have a session. And we thank Allah for that and whatever knowledge that He will be providing us with over the next hour or so, or whatever He has provided us with for the past 6 sessions. And peace and blessings be upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. So I'll just give you a formal introduction. I'm Wafiq. I'll be the moderator for the session today. Today we are into the 6th session of the whole Fiqh Muamalat Series, and we'll be touching on the topic of Islamic finance by Mr. Umar Munshi. So since this will be the last session, there will not be any more further sessions. So the sign up links, you guys can go ahead and use the sign up link to join the WhatsApp group, and we will be posting updates about sessions that we have actually uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So we have already uploaded lesson 1 and 2. Lesson 3 is actually in the process of being uploaded. So you should be able to see it by the end of the session, if not the end of the day lah. And also, if you guys got any friends or whatsoever, you can get them to join the group, and then if they can slowly start watching from lesson 1 all the way up till lesson 6, which will be today's lesson. And also, if you guys want updates about any sessions or any future events that we'll be planning for, you guys can follow us at SMU IBFS as well as FSAC_SG for events related to such topics. So without further ado, I will just quickly go on and touch on who do we have as our speaker today. We actually have Mr. Umar Munshi, who is a social entrepreneur from Singapore. He's the president of the Islamic Fintech Alliance and a co-founder of ETHIS.co, a group of pioneer crowdfunding and investment platforms with regulatory approvals in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Dubai. Its flagship platform, ETHIS Indonesia, is an award-winning property crowdfunding platform that's transacted impact investments from 50 over countries to build 9,000 plus homes for needy families, giving investors healthy double-digit income returns. Second platform, Global Sadaqah, is an Islamic social finance marketplace that works with Islamic banks to match charity organizations and social enterprises to corporates and high net worth public donors with a strong focus on zakat. ETHIS launched Malaysia's first Islamic equity crowdfunding platform in mid-2020 and is currently preparing to launch Dubai's first property crowdfunding platform. Mr. Munshi is passionate about spreading the opportunity for sustainable development through socially responsible applications of fintech and crowdfunding. He regularly gives masterclasses, presentations, and panel sessions at events and webinars. So as for today, we'll be touching on Islamic Fintech, which essentially is the new frontier for finance that has great potential to bridge the gaps between the traditional finance system and contemporary system. So without further ado, I'll actually just pass on my time to Mr. Munshi, who will take over from here to give his insight and share more about the session today. Mr. Munshi, you want to take over from here?
Yep, thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. So, is it okay? Am I clear?
Yeah, you want to share your screen, Mr. Munshi?
Yeah, I'll share. No worry. Yep, so I'll share my screen. Thank you for the kind introduction. And before I share my screen and jump into the presentation per se, I'd like to just have a few words. First of all, I'm very happy and very honored to be here. I thank all of you for making time to listen to me. Hope that I will provide significant value. And the main thing I wanted to say is that I'm a very, very firm believer in the power or in the ability of youth. And I will share very quickly a little bit about my background, my history, before I jump into the session, because I think the context is especially important. My context also is important because fintech is something that will continue to gain tremendous momentum over the coming decades, right? Even in the coming years and thereafter in the coming decades. And so it's something for the future, and thus it is something incredibly relevant for young people. Now, I'm quite old right now, but I started about 20 years ago doing business when I was 18. So that was when I was in national service. I think all the guys here know what I'm talking about. All the Singaporeans know what I'm talking about. So while I was in national service, I actually was quite lucky. I had some good extra time, and I had some good allowance, and I started doing business, right? And that business interest and that business passion in me grew. And from college, I went to NS, and then I went to university for a short while. And then I decided to focus on business. And my business career, my business history brought me to Indonesia, and then it brought me back to Singapore, and then now I'm based in Malaysia, right? Now, this is very important, because one thing I wanted to share before we go into the session proper is that today, to be a young entrepreneur, to be a startup founder, firstly, is cool, right? I think in general, the perception is like that. And secondly, there's no better time than now for young people to explore business and entrepreneurship. When I started doing business when I was 18, nobody took us seriously, right? I mean, we were kids to them, right? And what can kids do in business? But today you have all sorts of so-called kids creating huge, impactful businesses or commercially large businesses. And there's a lot to do with also technology. So this is the starting point of my session today. I want all of you, especially the young people, to think about the world today and how fintech can also be an area for you to go into, whether it's an entrepreneur or as a team member, as a staff, and progress from there. All right. Now, the other part I wanted to share about my background before I again go on to the session is how I got to know about Islamic finance. So when I was in Indonesia, back in my younger days, the business there grew quite large, alhamdulillah, over 6 years living in Indonesia. I first came to Indonesia knowing almost nobody, and eventually when I left, I had a good network, and that helped me set up the business today. But what happened was that when the business reached its peak after 6 years, right, we were spread out over 5 different cities. It was a health tech distribution business. It actually collapsed very quickly. It collapsed like in 1 week. You know, six years of sweat and tears collapsed in a week because of some, I would say, sabotage or internal sabotage. Yeah. So I had to go back to Singapore, pick up the pieces. I was in heavy debt. I was 26 years old, I think, at that time, 27 years old. Yeah, and I was under heavy debt. Now, in that kind of situation, I decided, as an entrepreneur, you go through ups and downs. So I decided, I'll view everything positively. And what I realized was that this business crash was actually a blessing for me. It was a big blessing, a huge blessing in disguise, you can say. Because what it led me to was actually Islamic finance. At that time, or before that, I had no idea what was halal and haram in business and finance, in muamalat. Right? All I knew was, I don't cheat people, I don't tell lies, I don't trick people, I'm not a fraudster, and so it's fine. Yep. But when I started to understand that riba is haram in the financial system, and that's where my mind opened up, and that's where my passion for Islamic finance started. All right. So I started a business in Singapore a few years after I came back to Singapore with a friend who's a lawyer, and we started promoting Islamic finance. And then the community grew. We had a community of Islamic finance enthusiasts, and that led to us launching our own business or product, which is ETHIS, which I'll talk about briefly later on. All right, so that's it as a prelude. I hope it gives you more understanding of where I come from, and hopefully, my journey also brings some value to all of you. So feel free to follow me on social media, on LinkedIn especially. I do share quite a bit of things, although recently I've been quite busy. All right, so this is the presentation, and I will go through this maybe in, I guess, half an hour or 40 minutes, because this is such a wide topic. There's so much to talk about. I can spend many hours and over a few days giving a course about Islamic fintech. So what I decided to do was to just touch on the basics and then go deeper through the Q&A. All right. So as I go through these slides, as I share the content that I have for you, you can start asking questions immediately in the Q&A and later on at the end of this session. Yeah, but as we go, feel free to type out your questions instead of trying to remember it and later on forgetting to ask it. Okay, so I expect a lot of questions because I'm going to give time for that later on. All right. So what we'll do is we'll go through some of the basics. Then I'll give you an idea, a representation of what's happening in Islamic fintech right now. And the part 3 is where it gets interesting. The first 2 parts is just more a narrative briefing kind of thing. Part 3 is where I share how I feel that fintech, and specifically Islamic fintech, can really change the world. And there is a huge need to change the world. When I say the world here, of course, it's in the context of finance. And then I will also talk about us, right? One of my favorite topics, which is to explain to you and share with you what we have gone through and what we're trying to accomplish, because I believe that we embody what Islamic fintech seeks out to do, right? Okay, so here's just some lines from me, just some thoughts to kickstart. And you can read out. I won't read off the slides, right? You can just read it on your own. But what I really want to focus on is the very first line, which is that there is huge, unprecedented, that means opportunity that we've never seen before, right? That there's no precedent for, to reshape finance because of fintech. And specifically in the context of today's discussion, to reshape Islamic finance through fintech, and beyond that, to spread Islamic finance via fintech to humanity, to the masses, not just Muslims, but to anyone and everyone who see the merit and feel the merit of the approach of Islamic finance. Yeah, and my view is Islamic finance is very much universal in its principles, in the targeted outcomes, and even in the method and the technical approach to how to get finance into the real economy, right? So this is what I feel we are, where I feel we are at right now. We are at this, crossroads or point of inflection that we can grow very, very quickly and create a lot of change, right? So here I highlight some points, right? Change will not only be fast, it will also be deep and wide. What I mean by that is it will touch everything, it's wide. Right? Fintech has already started touching many, many aspects of your life, of our lives. And now with the COVID, it's accelerated significantly, right? Really, really significantly. And not only is it wide, but it goes deep into how we function and how we work when it comes to finance, how we interact with financial services, how we perceive financial services. So when this change is ongoing all the time, right? And it's happening faster, believe it or not, in developing countries. The change is happening faster. Like for example, I used to go to Indonesia almost every month for ETHIS related purposes. But for a period last year, I stayed in Malaysia for about 6-9 months last year, before COVID. And that's because my wife was pregnant and got a baby and so on. And when I did go to Indonesia, the cash that I always carry around, because you have to pay small things here and there, is no longer wanted because everybody is cashless. Right? And that's Indonesia. If you go to China, it's really incredible. Right? Just do a Google search on the IPO recently by Jack Ma, and you'll understand what I mean. Yeah. And the fourth line, okay, I'll go through line by line instead. I think it's quite important. So the change will reshape how we work and how the economy works, and what we can do in the economy and what we should do in the economy. Right? Today, when you talk about the COVID and the recovery from the COVID, or the current status and the future, because of the changes that have been brought about by the COVID, we hear talk of a K-shaped recovery. K means some industries, some sectors go up, some businesses go up, and some go down, right? And that is because those that are more aligned with the new world, so-called, which is more digital, more focused on impact, more focused on inclusion and so on, will start going up. And conversely, the rest will start going down. Okay? And the last part is, second last line, however, technology and fintech is still a tool. And the tool is used by people, and people decide what to do with the tool. So it can be used for good or for bad. It can be used to benefit or to exploit. All right. And so this concept of capitalism, I mean, it's not inherently bad, but runaway capitalism, capitalism with no ethics, with no morals, is what has created so many problems. There's so much problems in the world today. And that's why I believe that Islamic finance implemented in fintech is the solution, because it comes with a framework, as I mentioned here, based on justice and social good. And the core of this framework does not change and has not changed for 1,400 years, right, or even before that. Right? Certain aspects may change because society changes, but the core, the basics, the baseline of what is ethical and what is not does not change. Right? I won't go so much into philosophy, but I think that's a very key point I want to highlight to all of you, because when you talk about morality and ethics in society, it changes based on what people like and want, what becomes popular, is normalized, and so on. Right? So, but I believe an ethical framework for humanity based on something that's unchanging, like the principles of Sharia or Islamic finance, is a very good solution for humanity. And there's one word I added here in the second line, which is speculate. And this hints at what's happening with the world today, where if you do a bit of research about the financial economy compared to the real economy, the financial economy is many, many times bigger than the real economy. And recently, and this is because of a lot to do with speculation and selling and reselling money and papers that represent money, represent debt. All right. Again, I can't go too deep into this right now, but this is very fundamental and very important. With Islamic fintech, with Islamic finance, the approach should be based on real business, should be based on real trade, right? That's the way it's supposed to work. Okay. All right. So I'll move on to the first slide. And again, I want to repeat, keep the questions coming. Whenever you have any question cross your mind, just shoot it out in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll check both later on. All right, so these are the basic aspects or components of fintech. Right, I have very few slides. I have like 6 slides, I think. I don't really like too many slides. I like to talk more. The slide just illustrates or summarizes what I'm trying to say. So for fintech, on the top portion, you see, I mean, there are many ways to slice it up and to categorize and to explain fintech. And this is one representation. But before that, the definition is very clear-cut. It's basically the delivery of financial services using technology, right? And some websites, some references, when you check, they will say that, oh, fintech has been around for a very long time, from the time where we had so-called digital money, when banks started using computers, when ATMs came out, that's all fintech. I think it's quite redundant and pointless to talk about that kind of context of fintech, because now we're talking about this new wave of technology that has changed the world and is changing the world, continues to change the world. And that is, in a way, one way to describe it is cloud-based or digital-based technologies, right? Which we use every day. Yeah? We use platforms, we use apps, and they're all digital. And that is the key, to me, the key difference of what fintech is right now today, and why it will have and can have a significant change in our future. So the circles here you see is more focused on the technology aspect, and in itself can also be considered a form of fintech or a fintech product or solution. And at the bottom is more of categories of products. And again, it's not exhaustive. There are variations in between. There are new products coming out all the time, right? So let me go through the 5 circles. First is web and mobile, right? Doesn't sound too sexy, doesn't sound too profound as a technology, but out of everything you see on the screen, that is probably the single biggest driver of fintech adoption, right? In countries like China and Indonesia, a large portion of the population of the emerging world in general leapfrog or bypass the computer, laptop, desktop stage, and they go straight to using the internet on the mobile, right? Especially today with the proliferation of low-cost smartphones. So here is where there is an immediate change because of the medium of interaction, which is your personal device. Yeah, and today we can see web technologies and mobile technologies become very, very important and very, very prominent, right? And this is continuously evolving. Okay, then there's automation. And why automation is important is because automation allows for scalability, right? That means things can scale because you've already fixed the way it works, and it works without human intervention. So if you have 5 customers, it does the same thing for you. If you have 100 customers, that same automation can do the same thing for you. Of course, there's some differences in infrastructure, but fundamentally, automation allows you to scale. And when you can scale without having more human resources, then you can do a lot more things at lower cost. And that is very much related to the delivery of financial services. Because why do, for example, banks tend to serve the larger borrowers, and why do the capital market players, the fund managers, the private equity firms, why do they tend to invest in the larger businesses? Is because for a certain amount of human effort, they can get a lot of business, right? Just give you an example. You want to get a big company, $100 million company, you as a bank, you want to provide a loan to them, a financing to them, Islamic or otherwise, as compared to 100 small businesses, and these two are of the equal size. They will borrow or get the same amount of financing from you, but one is dealing with a big company and one is dealing with 100 small companies. Right? So obviously, it makes a lot more sense for the banks and for the incumbents to focus on the first client. But the need is in the second client type. And not only the need, the opportunity is in the second client type, right? So with automation, that I can create one approach of doing things, one process flow, and that process flow can then work for 5, 10, 100, 1,000 organizations or customers, right? Related to automation is also blockchain. Blockchain is a very big, wide topic, and I'd like to highlight the disclaimer where I'm not an expert in all of these things, right? I am a practitioner, an entrepreneur who learns as I go. So for blockchain, I won't go into the technology, but basically it's a new way of recording information. It's a new way of data being organized that allows for more automation, and not only more, but deeper automation, because you can embed data within a framework which can set rules, right? That is sort of programmable. And there are limitations to blockchain, but there's also huge upside in terms of the applications of blockchain, right? So I'll talk more about that when I talk about cryptos. And big data analytics, basically, it's where today, whenever we do anything online, there's a lot of data being transacted, being moved around all the time, being collected, right? And the issue today is not about not having enough data. The issue with a lot of different businesses, and the challenge for a lot of businesses is how do you use the data? Right? We can have a lot of data, but if you don't understand the data, then what's the point? So this is where analytics comes in. So all of this data that we have, all of this data that's coming to the different platforms with every single engagement you have with the internet or with an app, that data can then be analyzed. And when the data is analyzed, it can help the system or the business make better decisions or understand the customers better. All right. And especially in Islamic Fintech, I think this is incredibly interesting. Like, for example, is there a correlation between, let's say, a client, Muslim client, who is more religious or more practicing as a Muslim compared to one who's not, right? So, for example, let's say visiting the mosque is an indication of religiosity or of a practicing Muslim, right? So maybe data will show that someone who goes to the mosque more often is more creditworthy and less likely to default compared to someone who doesn't. Maybe, I'm just giving an example. Or maybe it will show that there's no correlation, right? Or maybe someone who reaches the mosque late compared to someone who goes early to the mosque may be an indication of a personality trait, for example, right? So these are all very interesting new areas that more and more companies are looking into today, whether in the Islamic space or not. And this leads me to AI. So AI is where you can sort of teach, develop programs and teach programs to learn in theory, to learn. And when they learn and when they are teachable, then potentially it can make decisions. And if this is properly done, then the decisions would, in theory, be better decisions than what a human can make, right? And that is because for humans, we have a lot of things that disturb our minds, from emotions to biases to pressure from around us and so on, right? Whereas for a computer, for a program, once that logic is embedded, is put in, then it will continue to follow that logic. Yeah, we read all sorts of funny stories where AI bots create their own language, and then the programmers no longer understand what they're talking about to each other and stuff like that. All this sci-fi stuff. Yeah, I don't know how dangerous that part is, and whether it's true or not, or whether it's just all these kind of clickbait articles that we see nowadays. But basically, AI, I'm not an expert in AI. I don't dabble in AI yet, but in my interaction with various other experts and also prominent individuals in this space, and also prominent organizations, AI is seen as a very, very important component, one of the most critical new technologies that can change the world and change how we do things. All right. So those are the technology types, I guess, or the verticals of technology that feed into fintech. And from there, we have these 6 different categories of products or solutions. Okay. And it will take some time to run through each and every one of them. But these are things that you can Google on your own. You can just watch short videos on your own. So I'll just try to just touch on them, especially for the crowdfunding part, because that's what we do at ETHIS. Yeah. So crowdfunding may not seem so high tech. If you go to very basic crowdfunding platforms, it's very straightforward. It's just a platform for people who are people and businesses and projects looking for funds to submit information. And then if the information is approved or curated, or sometimes there's various levels of approvals and so on, then eventually that information is curated and put on the platform. And then the public is freely able to allocate funds, whether invest, donate, or contribute to these projects, campaigns, or companies. All right. So it's just a marketplace. It's a platform that matches funders to fundraisers. Yeah. Very similar to all the other platforms that you are already engaging with. For example, ride-hailing apps, Grab, Uber, Karim, and all that. It's a platform. So as a platform for a ride-hailing app, the vehicles are not typically owned by the platform. The drivers are not employed by or the riders are not employed by the platform. The platform just matches the passenger or the delivery to the driver and the vehicle, right? So the platform is just a matchmaker. That's essentially what crowdfunding is. We are a matchmaker between the two sides, right? Now, why is this significant? Because this business model is it's not really a new tech. It essentially, with the first one, web or mobile technology, you can have a crowdfunding platform. We don't need any of the others. Of course, the rest, the other 4 circles, can and will add a lot of value to the crowdfunding platform, right? In terms of its effectiveness and scalability and so on. But fundamentally, you can set up a crowdfunding platform today with just $200 or $100 or even less, because you have platforms as services today that you just subscribe, to a crowdfunding platform provider, and then you have your own platform. It's not rocket science. Now, but why is it so significant, and how significant is it right now? I mean, depending on which data source you look at, China supposedly surpassed $100 billion in crowdfunding volume about 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 years ago, I think 2017. But since then, there were a number of large-scale frauds, and the government had to basically intervene. And now there are very large crowdfunding platforms in China, but they have been pushed into becoming almost like a bank now. Yeah? So that is still there and it's still big, but at its peak, it was more than $100 billion in China. In Indonesia, the closest large market for crowdfunding, it has already reached 10 billion US dollars, right? In Singapore, I don't have figures. And Singapore, typically, there are a number of large crowdfunding platforms in Singapore, but they are usually having some business overseas, right? With Singapore as the base. Okay. And just to reiterate my earlier point, to backtrack a little bit, crowdfunding can be implemented in any kind of context that requires fundraising and where there are people or institutions willing to provide funds for that. Yeah, so this is very interesting because in the past, who decides on where money goes to? Sometimes it's people, because rich individuals or people with extra money can decide on your own if you want to fund your friend, your neighbor, your cousin, or whoever, right? But that is, I would say, quite small as a component of the funds moving around in the economy. Most of the funds will come from banks and or the capital market when a significant company goes for listing or when it seeks investment from private equity or venture capital. Yeah. So most of the time, there is this intermediary that has a large say, or maybe the entire say, on where money goes to, right? So the bank will decide, or banks decide. I mean, they have their frameworks on who to lend and how to lend, but essentially the bank will decide. And at the end of the day, even though there are banks that try to do things in a ethical way to help society and so on, definitely, I'm not saying all banks are bad, right? Nothing like that. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, these banks and financial institutions need to protect the interests of the shareholders, which in most of the time would be predominantly focused, all right? And so we go back to the earlier example of lending to a big company or providing finance to many small companies. And so that's what's happening today, right? The financial system is very top heavy, right? It focuses a lot on providing funds to large players. There is a joke that me and my friends sometimes share when we give talks, which is that who do the banks lend money to? And the answer is those who don't need money. Right? Those who need money are not going to get money from the bank. Right? Those who don't need money, who are already wealthy, who are already big, then there's a higher chance for them to get money from the bank. Right? But then again, I'm not saying banks are bad. Banks have their role to play. Right? So I'll go into neobanks shortly. But to finish up on crowdfunding, so who then now decides? Right? Who decides on a crowdfunding platform? It is the crowd. It is you. As long as there's a group of people willing to give money or put money or invest in a particular person, campaign, business, or project, then a crowdfunding platform should be there for that kind of project. Right? There's all sorts of crowdfunding platforms. A very cool one that I actually did spend some time studying last time, because I was studying, or not studying, like just doing some research on what creates virality in a crowdfunding platform. Is called Honey Fund in the US, where whenever a couple gets married, what they do just before they get married is that they will launch a crowdfunding campaign on Honey Fund. And why honey? Because it came from the word honeymoon. So typically, when it first started, right, I'm going to get married, and people are going to come to my wedding and give me all sorts of funny gifts. Some of them will give me money, some of them will give me funny gifts, right? So instead of that awkwardness, I decide to run a crowdfunding campaign and say, I want to go to the Maldives, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to wherever with my future wife, and I need $10,000, right? Or I need down payment for a house for a new family, or blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's Honey Fund. And it became very viral very fast because everybody who's getting married will send this to his entire invite list, right? And then it gets spread to beyond the invite list. Yeah, so that's one application of crowdfunding. Now, on the other extreme, crowdfunding also has investment focus. And that is something I'll touch more on when I talk about what we do at ETHIS. All right, so that's crowdfunding, and there's a lot more to be said about this, but I'll move on to neobanks for now. Neobanks have many names: neobank, digital bank, virtual bank, challenger bank. These are all more or less the same, I guess. And there's also payments, which is maybe not really banking. It's more of all your e-wallets, payment gateways, online remittances, and so on. But I lump it together because these are also services that the bank provides. So neobanks and payments, I would say, do compete with each other to some extent. The main difference is that neobanks collect and safeguard deposits, right? You save money there. Whereas for other payments, it facilitates the movement of the money instead of keeping the money. Now, in Southeast Asia, digital banking is very, very new. I don't know the latest, but from what I remember, in Singapore, there are regulations coming out or already come out, and a few banks I think should be launched soon. And this is not mobile banking, right? This is not DBS, POSB, OCBC, UOB's app that you are already using. This is a totally new kind of bank that's all online. Okay, that means you can sign up, open up an account, and engage with the bank without having to go to the bank or meet anybody. I think in Singapore, the need for this may not be so large because banks are so accessible. But in other countries, there is a great need for it. And again, we have not seen much of it in this part of the world. Yeah, but in Europe especially, there's been a lot of digital banks and gaining significant traction. Right? Now for payments, I think one of the most important areas of payment that really, I hope will grow faster is cross-border payments, which is online remittances. You can check out in Singapore, one of the platforms that I use and that I know them, they are my friends. It's called TransSwap. I think they're really good. They give very good rates. And there are a lot of others as well. The global leader is called TransferWise. Yeah, TransferWise. So payments is important because the cost of transfers today is incredibly high. When you transfer money, firstly, you don't know exactly, sometimes from various countries that are not having so much alignment. You don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know how much the cost is going to be, and so on. Right? Because we, as my business, ETHIS, our business, we facilitate investments from around the world to go to Malaysia and Indonesia. And it's anyone's guess how much money will reach there sometimes. Right? But over time, we can identify a range of loss. And this loss can be from the very lowest will be 0.8%. It can even go up until 3 or 4%, depending on the amount, the country, and so on. So that's crazy. It's a lot of money. So neobanks and payments will help a lot to make the world more borderless, to make finance more easily transacted cross-border. Okay. Now, micro investing is something really cool, where you can invest very, very small amounts over periods of time. Right? You can do it. You can set it up in whatever way you want. Right? And there are various apps that can do that. A lot of the time, this component or this feature is part of another larger app that has more services. Right? And then there's also robo advisors, which basically programs that function as your financial advisor and suggest to you or automate for you where you invest and when. Right? So I think this is very interesting because for a lot of people, for most people, you don't have so much spare cash to invest. But if you could invest $1 a day, for example, then I think many of you would probably be able to afford it. And if this can be automated, and if the system, if the app can be intelligent to make sure, or at least maybe not guarantee, but to a large extent, place your money where, based on your preferences, right, of risk and reward and so on, then it can bring a lot of value, right? One of the reasons why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer is because the rich tend to invest and grow their money, and their money works for them, right? So with micro investing, with robo advisors, it becomes more automated, it becomes smaller denominations and opens up investing to the masses, right? So that's really cool. I think it's really going to be a game changer, especially in the Muslim world, and which is largely the emerging world, right? Now, InsurTech, RegTech, and crypto. I have 3 more to go through. InsurTech basically is online-based or digital-based insurance, and because it's all programmable and because you can have so-called microservices, due to the 5 different circles I have up there. You can automate, you can have data analysis, you can have AI, blah, blah, blah. And so your InsurTech providers are able to serve specific categories or groups or demographics of people more effectively, and also able to be more, I would say, more targeted in their solutions or their products. Right? In Singapore, there's a few as well. So for InsurTech, let me give you an example. Typically for insurance, everybody is pooled, and there's all these different probabilities and actuarial science going into the calculations. And in some way or other, the healthier people or the businesses who are healthier or whoever is being insured will be subsidizing those who are not, right? And that's how it works. So now with InsurTech, they can go deep into your data, for example. And I give you one example would be, there are some platforms there are some InsurTech solutions that give you lower premiums, lower cost, if you exercise regularly, for example, right? And they can track your exercise. Yeah. So this is one way in which insurance can be more effectively delivered to the people, right? And there are also features that make it more inclusive, more sustainable, and so on, because the cost structure is low. There are a lot of InsurTech platforms that also give back any access periodically, quite consistently, to the people who pay for that service. Right? So that's very close to one of the features of Takaful, right? Which I think you probably went through recently. Right now, RegTech and crypto. Okay, these are two other big areas to talk about. Oh, it's already 45 minutes. Okay, I got to speed up. I want to leave more time for Q&A. So for RegTech, I think I won't go deep into it, but whenever you talk about financial services, there's always going to be the issue of compliance, governance, to make sure that so-called bad money, illegal money, bad sources of money, and so on, and also protecting of public money and all that is well taken care of. So that's where RegTech comes in, together with the different technologies that are in the circles there, to automate, simplify, and ensure that things are moving in a compliant way, right? And crypto is another very wide topic, and I would say that if you're looking into crypto, my view is the crypto space has been, in the past 5 years, very much speculative and flooded with all sorts of funny white papers and initiatives and programs. A lot of them, from my understanding, are frauds. A lot of them are maybe initially sincere and proper and solid, but because they are subject to the fluctuations of the crypto market, it becomes difficult for anything tangible or viable to emerge. However, I believe that is a maturity phase for crypto, and today crypto has reached maybe not a tipping point, but reach another level of maturity. So today, you have various types or kinds of cryptos. There are cryptos that are based purely on concept and theory and technology. There are cryptos that are linked directly to the real world. For example, backed by gold, backed by physical asset, backed by a form of security, let's say shareholding in a company, and so on. So I believe that crowdfunding will eventually be very much crypto-based, right? Today, you want to buy property in Singapore, okay? Because the market is a good time to buy, right? The market is quite bad and probably will get worse in the coming months because people have issues servicing their loans. When the moratorium in Singapore ends, and as well as other countries, when the banks start to collect money again, then we'll see defaults and people will want to sell their assets, or the bank will have to take over some of the houses that they've been financing and sell it, and that pushes down the market. So can you buy, as a student, can you buy a house today? Can you buy an apartment? Can you buy a condo? Can you buy a terrace house? It's highly unlikely unless you're born in a rich family or you've done some side business that made you a lot of money. But with crowdfunding, we can have $1 million property invested by 10,000 people, for example, right? Or maybe typically not so many people, but it can potentially be done through a combination of crowdfunding, micro-investing, and crypto, right? And then all these other components can also come in. And so the crypto is, I mean, for fintech, it's difficult to draw lines because the technologies and the products, eventually there are overlaps. But I hope that this one diagram and my brief explanation of each component has given you a better understanding of what fintech is. All right, so that's the 1, 2, 3s and ABCs of fintech. Now, Islamic fintech. So Islamic fintech just means that it's fintech implemented in a way that's Sharia compliant or aligned with the Sharia, or in the loosest definition, so-called Muslim friendly or tailored to the needs of Muslims, right? But in my view, it should definitely need to be Sharia compliant formally. And beyond that, it should also seek to fulfill the objectives of the Sharia. And that's what I would consider true Islamic fintech, right? Because it's not just fintech or not just Islamic in form, it is Islamic in substance, spirit, and outcome, right? Maybe idealistic, but as I mentioned earlier, now is the time to dream, now is the time to make things happen. So this is the latest account, I think, from IFN News, and here you have 147. I think the latest was 150, but this just gives you a mapping of what's available in the market, and it's a mix of very new companies, very mature companies. There are even companies I see here that I know are no longer operating, which is normal because in the startup space, typically more than half of startups don't make it in any industry, in any sector, Islamic or not, right? So these companies may come and go, but this gives you a representation of where we are right now. So it looks like not bad. Wow, 150 companies, that's more than maybe you imagined. But compared to the global fintech market, it's less than 1%, right? So it's still very, very early stage, I would say. When we started ETHIS in Singapore in 2014, late 2014, early 2015, there were just a handful of Islamic fintech companies. And since then, I would say it's taken too long, really, for Islamic fintech to start growing. But in the past 1 year, the amount of progress the industry has made at the ecosystem level has surpassed the previous 5 years combined. All right. So really, the tipping point is here. The tide. When I say the tide is coming, it is a holistic view of what I understand of Islamic fintech today, from the regulators to investors to entrepreneurs to incumbent organizations. Across the spectrum of the ecosystem, there is a lot of interest, there is a lot of movement, and there's already a lot of deals happening and businesses going, right? One thing I also observe, especially if any of you are going into fintech or wanting to be an entrepreneur, a lot of the established individuals in Islamic finance are also keen to support new initiatives and ideas, whether as an investor or as an advisor or as a collaborator. Right, so that's really, really great, and that can really fast track your growth or your rollout of your business, inshallah. Okay, so I will not touch too much on this. Maybe I'll just highlight some of the key players that I personally know. For robo-advisors, especially, you can see where's robo-advisors. Okay, let me just highlight one each from each category and just talk about it a little bit, right? Just to give you some context. Alternative finance, maybe I will highlight Manzil. You can see here, this is the top left, right in the middle. So Manzil is very cool. It's it's sort of like equity financing for mortgages for people to buy homes in Canada, right? And it just launched, I think, about a year ago, and they're moving strongly right now. Yeah, so very interesting concepts, the Mecca concept, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, and going down to data analytics, there's a lot of significant companies here. The most prominent probably that's been around for a long time in screening Sharia stocks, and today they are about to launch a very significant new kind of stock market. It's called Ideal Ratings, right? And they have an office in Singapore, right? So you can check it out. For blockchain and crypto, I was actually involved in a few of this, but a lot of them are still in the early stage. Yeah. So Halal chain, for example, I was involved at the start, and I have some Halal coins, they call it. And then there's Grainer, some former staff of ETHIS went on their own company. There's a number of interesting ones here, right? Challenger banking, I think I'll skip that. Maybe I'll focus on okay. So Islamic enablers also. There are some players who are very interesting where they will provide you with technology for equity. So you don't have to worry about the tech part because maybe you're not a technical founder or you're not so much into the technology side. Right? One of them is Ground One Ventures, and there's another one here that's not here, which is called Knowledge Net Saudi. Right? So they take up equity as a technology provider. Yeah. For crowdfunding and P2P, there's a lot here, and most of them are my friends. So I'll be fair and not talk about any of them. And I want to highlight Wahid. I don't know where it is. It's probably somewhere here. Oh yeah, Wahid Invest. Robo Advisors right on top. They're the most prominent Islamic fintech today. They've raised, I think, $40 million so far. And they're growing very fast. They're in many countries already. The regional head is Singaporean, who was an entrepreneur and went to join Wahid. All right. So maybe I'll pause for now and move to the next slide. Okay, so here, so that's all brief, right? That's all context, that's all information. Here I have some evaluation and analysis. So the old way of finance, which is still there, which is still relevant, and which will continue to be relevant, I believe. But slowly, fintech is chipping away at a lot of the services and value propositions that the old players have or have been providing, right? And I already touched on all of this already, actually. But just to reiterate, firstly, is powered by people, and that's a huge, huge differentiator because you now decide, we now collectively decide where money goes to and what it does, right? And especially for millennials, I was reading a report recently, I can't remember where, but it was incredibly high, the percentage of millennials who invest and who consider ethics and impact and alignment to their values when they invest is, from that statistic, is like 90%, something like that. Meaning you only invest in something when it resonates with you at a moral, ethical level, right? You won't invest in something you don't like. Okay, so I think that's really great. All of us here are millennials. I'm at the top end, like 1 year, just fall into the millennial category. And I think that's really great to know, right? People want to see their money doing good, even if it's small money, right? Doesn't matter. Secondly, related to that, driven by values and impact, okay? Because fintech today is so transparent, so open, it's all online. Fintech players can't afford to be exploitative, right? Because the people will know, the users will know. And when you're online, there's so much more accountability. If you want, as you move and you scale up, that level of pressure will always be there, right? Then, of course, mobile first. That's what I mentioned earlier on, especially for the large emerging population globally. Inclusive, right? These are all things that are very different from how the incumbent financial system is. And lastly, very affordable and very, very transparent, right? For example, today you save money in the bank, you have no idea where that money will go to, right? It's entirely up to the bank. They don't need to report to you that, oh, your money was used to lend money to this person or that person or so on, right? But for technology companies, especially for Islamic fintechs, affordability and transparency, I believe, should be part of the business model, right? And all of this combined, the summary at the bottom is fintech can and will and has started to, even to a very large extent in some countries, to circulate money in the real economy. You remember early on I talked about the financial economy, how it's so big and very much separated from the real world today. And that creates a lot of cyclical change in the economy. You can Google it on your own, but a lot of theory shows that the economic recessions that we face is also largely because of this. So when we put money back to the real world, to the real economy, that is where there is real benefit and impact and sustainability, inshallah. All right. Okay, So I'm done with the brief crash course on Islamic Fintech. And here I'll talk about ETHIS. I have about 3 slides, I think. And this is what we want to do, which is very aligned with what I was sharing earlier. ETHIS is the combination of the words ethical and Islamic, right? And if you stare long enough at our logo, you will see it's repeated 4 times at the sides of our logo, and that encompasses everything that we do. Yeah, our mission is to drive movement of capital or money effectively and impactfully, and in doing so, uplift humanity. So we have a very, very big vision, right? We want to change the world, basically. I'm aware. I'm a realist as well. It's a tall order to do something like this, and we are in a very, very early part of our journey. But what we believe can happen and will happen is, inshallah, whatever we're working on will endure beyond our lifetimes. It will leave a legacy. It will encourage others. It will stimulate others. It will trigger others, especially for Islamic Fintech. And that's why we decided to embrace this as a pioneer. We were one of the pioneers. We still are one of the pioneers. And so we have this somewhat of informal responsibility to push the sector. And that's why myself and my partner Ronald, we are involved in organizations and ecosystem work a lot. Yeah. So what do? We are crowdfunding. We are grow crowdfunding platforms. We have 2 regulated platforms. One in Indonesia that does P2P or lending-based crowdfunding, financing-based crowdfunding, and we have an equity crowdfunding platform in Malaysia that's regulated by the Securities Commission. So very quickly, what these 2 platforms do is, for Indonesia, we can basically provide lending, Sharia compliant financing, and we can provide it to any sector, any kind of industry, and even to individuals if we wanted to. What we have been focused on, I'll show you in the next slide, is social housing development. So people from around the world invest in social housing development projects, which are impact investment, and they make a healthy profit from it in the process, right? In Malaysia, as an equity crowdfunding platform, we basically are like a new form of stock market or stock issuance platform. So companies can raise funds on our platform by issuing or giving, selling equity to the public, right? So you have an idea, of course it needs to be set up in Malaysia. So you have an idea, a plan of business in Malaysia, even if it's early stage, you could still potentially raise funds through equity crowdfunding platforms, right? And so those are the 2 platforms that we have. We also have a social finance platform called Global Sedekah, which matches charitable funds, zakat funds, wakaf funds, and so on, mainly focused on corporates and, of course, the public as well. You can go to globalsedekah.com and check it out. So you can access all our platforms from ethis.co, right? So you can check it as I speak. Now, these are the 4 areas that we are focused on, and it's quite wide range of areas. Our history, our track record to date is in property, and in the last 6 months, we've started moving into SME, startups, and agriculture. Okay, so this is a snapshot of what we've done as of end of last year. All these units and houses, and even the school at the bottom left, received funding from our crowd. We have about 1,400 transactions from around the world. You can see majority from Singapore, and very little from Indonesia, because essentially we were processing our license there, which we only got at the end of last year. So we were in a long proof of concept phase while waiting for licenses to be acquired. But alhamdulillah, we were allowed to operate, and we managed to establish this track record. So we've done 1,400 transactions into about 50 projects in Indonesia, all online. Majority have never been to Indonesia, invested in Indonesia before, and based purely on online interaction with us and mobile interaction with us, they decide to invest. And one thing very interesting in the past 6 months, with the onset of the pandemic, is we see much larger investors from further away, from Middle East and Europe, investing in our projects. Right? There's a bit from Singapore, because Singapore, most of the investors are small or medium-sized investors who are basically workers or professionals, And so with the pandemic, they may be less secure in terms of their job, or they may lose their jobs, right? But for wealthier individuals, what we see is the COVID has actually opened up their minds and opened up their interest to invest in emerging countries. Yeah, so that's really cool. I think it's a very important trend that we see. And here's another program. So I wanted to just touch on a few things that we do instead of explaining everything that we do, because you can check that out on your own. This is the program under Global Sedekah. It's a social finance program where we provide something called Qard Hasan, which is zero interest or zero cost financing or loan. Literally, Qard Hasan means a good loan or goodwill loan, right? So here is where we receive charity funds, and this charity funds is not given one-off. It is provided as a form of lending at no cost, and the beneficiary or the borrower is expected to pay back as fast or as much as he can, right? But in the event that they have a legitimate difficulty in paying back, then the spirit of Qard Hasan is you have to let it go. You have to forgive and write off that loan. Yeah. So this is what we have. We have two types of programs for Qard Hasan. The one that you see here is microfinance. So they are supposed to pay back unless there's there's a good reason not to pay back. And another one for smaller business, for riskier, less stable recipients, then is charity to charity, meaning we lend them the funds as charity, and they are encouraged to pay back as charity, right? But they're not contractually obliged to pay back. All right. And based on this, we did some calculation, right? Just to show you how sustainable. 100,000 ringgit or dollars that goes out as Qard Hasan. We did some calculations, assuming within 6 months, 30% default. They say, I cannot pay you back, right? So they will lose some of that money. But the remainder will continue to be lent and recycled and recycled. Over 5 years, we would have disbursed and collected 300,000, which is 3 times more than the initial capital, right? So that's really great. That's it. All right, I've reached the end of my presentation. Oh, I took an hour. I wanted to do it faster, but yeah, 1 hour I guess is good. We have half an hour for Q&A. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can go to our website, Facebook, social media, LinkedIn, wherever, or email us. And do follow me on LinkedIn as well. I think that's it for my presentation.